At 68 years old, Vince Gill is still standing on the Grand Ole Opry stage most weekends, guitar in hand, the same soaring tenor voice that made him famous 40 years ago. But here's what almost nobody talks about. In an industry built on rivalries, feuds, and public fallouts, Vince Gill has spent 4 decades doing something almost unheard of in country music. He hasn't made enemies. He's made almost every major star in the genre owe him something. This is the real story of how one of the most talented musicians in country music history became, by nearly every account from the people who actually worked with him, the person everybody wanted in the room. Not because he stayed quiet and safe, because of what he actually did behind the scenes over and over again, for decades. Vince Gill was born Vincent Grant Gill on April 12, 1957, in Norman, Oklahoma. His father was a federal appellate court judge who also happened to play music on the side, and it was his dad who first put a banjo, then a guitar, in young Vince's hands. That same father also introduced him to golf, a sport that would become a lifelong passion and, later, the foundation for one of Gill's biggest charitable projects. Growing up in Oklahoma, Gill joined a local bluegrass band called Mountain Smoke while he was still in high school, and it was clear early on that this kid could play. Not just sing, play. Guitar, mandolin, banjo, fiddle. Gill absorbed instruments the way other teenagers absorb sports stats. At 18, he left Oklahoma and moved to Louisville, Kentucky, to join a band called Bluegrass Alliance. While he was there, he got the chance to play briefly with Ricky Skaggs in Skaggs's band, Boone Creek. This was Gill's real education. Bluegrass is an unforgiving genre. There's no hiding a weak player in a bluegrass band, because everything is exposed, every note is heard. Gill came out of that world as one of the most technically gifted musicians of his generation, and that reputation as a musician's musician would follow him for the rest of his career. In 1976, Gill moved to Los Angeles and started working with fiddler Byron Berlin in a group called Sundance. 3 years later, in 1979, he auditioned on a whim for a band called Pure Prairie League and got the job as their lead singer. With Pure Prairie League, Gill actually had a taste of mainstream success, singing on the top 10 pop hit Let Me Love You Tonight. He was in his early 20s and already touring, recording, and living the life of a working professional musician. But Pure Prairie League was a pop-rock band, not a country outfit, and something in Gill kept pulling him back toward the sound he grew up on. In 1983, Gill made the move that would define the rest of his life. He packed up with his wife and young daughter and relocated to Nashville. He signed with RCA Records and released 3 albums with the label. These records didn't make him a superstar, but they built something arguably more valuable at that stage of his career: a reputation. Gill became one of the most in-demand session musicians in Nashville. He played guitar on other people's records. He wrote songs that other artists recorded. He toured as a member of Emmylou Harris's band. He even recorded a duet with Rosanne Cash. If you were an artist recording in Nashville in the mid-1980s and you needed a guitar part that was technically flawless and emotionally right, there was a good chance you called Vince Gill. Here's a moment from that era that a lot of casual country fans don't know about. Mark Knopfler, the guitarist and frontman of Dire Straits, one of the biggest rock bands in the world at the time, invited Gill to join Dire Straits as a second guitarist. This was an enormous offer. Dire Straits was selling out arenas across multiple continents, and Knopfler himself was regarded as one of the most respected guitar players alive. It would have meant international fame, a much bigger stage, and a very different career path. Gill was tempted, but he turned it down because he wasn't ready to give up on country music and the solo career he was still trying to build. What's notable is what happened afterward. Gill and Knopfler stayed friends, and Gill later played as a guest guitarist on a Dire Straits record. He turned down the gig, not the relationship. That pattern, staying close to people even when he says no to them, shows up again and again throughout his career. By the late 1980s, Gill's solo career at RCA had stalled. He made the decision to leave and sign with MCA Records, reuniting with a producer and friend named Tony Brown. Together they made the album When I Call Your Name, released in 1989. The title track became the turning point of his entire career. It climbed to number 2 on the country charts, featured guest vocals from Patty Loveless, and won Single of the Year at the CMA Awards. At the 1990 Grammy Awards, it won Best Male Country Vocal Performance. The album went platinum. After more than a decade of paying dues as a session player, a touring sideman, and a solo artist who hadn't quite broken through, Vince Gill, at 32 years old, was finally a star in his own right. The 1990s were Gill's decade. His follow-up album, Pocket Full of Gold, went platinum as well, with 4 top 10 singles. He racked up a string of #1 hits throughout the decade. I Still Believe in You, Don't Let Our Love Start Slipping Away, One More Last Chance, Trying to Get Over You, and The Heart Won't Lie, a duet with Reba McEntire. That collaboration with McEntire is worth pausing on, because it's a good example of how Gill actually operated in the industry. Instead of hoarding the spotlight, he consistently sought out and elevated other artists through collaboration. Over the course of his career, he has appeared on more than 1,000 albums, working alongside an enormous range of artists across genres. That number alone tells you something. 1,000 albums isn't a guy protecting turf. That's a guy who shows up. In 1991, Gill was invited to join the Grand Ole Opry, a membership he has treasured and maintained for over 3 decades, still appearing on that stage regularly today. And starting in 1992, he took on a role that, in hindsight, might be the single biggest reason so many people in the industry speak so warmly of him. He became the host of the CMA Awards. He hosted the show for 12 consecutive years, through 2003, a record for consecutive hosting of a major televised award show that still stands. Anyone who has watched footage from those broadcasts remembers the same thing. Gill's gentle, self-deprecating humor, his quick ad-libs, and most of all, the respect he showed to his peers on that stage, win or lose. Hosting an award show for 12 straight years means standing in front of your entire industry, year after year, and choosing not to embarrass anyone. That's a harder job than it sounds like, and Gill made it look effortless. His personal life shifted in the late 1990s. Gill and his first wife, Janice Oliver, divorced in 1997 after 17 years of marriage. In March of 2000, he married Christian pop singer Amy Grant. The two have performed together over the years, including joint tours, and their marriage has become one of the more visible and enduring partnerships in the music industry. In 2012, Gill received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, placed, fittingly, right alongside his wife's. In 2005, Gill was inducted into the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame, recognition for a side of his career that sometimes gets overshadowed by his performing. The man can write. In 2007, he received what is widely considered the highest honor in the genre, induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame. He was the 3rd artist inducted in a specific category created just 2 years earlier, for artists who achieved national prominence from 1975 onward. By the time all was said and done across his career, Gill had accumulated 19 CMA awards, including a record 4 Song of the Year honors, 22 Grammy Awards, and 8 Academy of Country Music Awards. 22 Grammys is more than any other male country artist has ever won. Let that sit for a second. Across his entire career, spanning more than 4 decades, Gill has released more than 20 albums, sold over 30 million records, and charted 45 singles. But awards and record sales only tell part of the story, and honestly, they're probably not even the most important part. Ask anyone in the Nashville music community about Vince Gill, and the conversation almost always turns to his generosity, not his guitar playing. In 1993, drawing on that passion for golf his father passed down to him, Gill helped create an annual charity golf tournament known as the Vince Gill Pro Celebrity Invitational, specifically to raise money for junior golf programs across Tennessee. He also started an annual celebrity basketball game as another vehicle for charitable giving. Over the decades, Gill has participated in hundreds of charitable events, to the point where he's regularly described in the industry as one of country music's most dedicated humanitarians. This isn't a once-a-year photo opportunity for him. It's a sustained, decades-long habit. There's also his ongoing membership in the Time Jumpers, a Nashville-based Western swing supergroup made up of some of the most respected session musicians in the city. This is a group of players who could easily have gone solo, chased individual stardom, and cashed in on their own reputations. Instead, a rotating cast of Nashville's most in-demand musicians, Gill included, gets together to play Western swing purely because they love the music and love playing with each other. That's the kind of project you join for the music, not for the spotlight, and it says a lot about where Gill's priorities have consistently been throughout his career. In 2014, Gill teamed up with Carrie Underwood, an artist a generation younger than him, for a collaboration that bridged two very different eras of country music. It's one more example in a long pattern. Rather than drawing sharp lines between real country and whatever the newer generation is doing, Gill has repeatedly reached across those generational gaps to work with younger artists. And most recently, in 2025, the CMA honored Gill with its Willie Nelson Lifetime Achievement Award, a recognition of his lasting impact on the genre as a whole, coming near the very end of a career that began back in the bluegrass clubs of Kentucky in the 1970s. So what actually explains the reputation Vince Gill carries in the industry, the one that gets summed up so often as country music's nicest guy? It isn't that he avoided conflict or kept his head down. It's the opposite. He hosted the biggest stage in the genre for 12 years running and used it to lift other people up. He turned down a spot in one of the biggest rock bands on the planet and stayed loyal to a struggling solo career and to the friendship with the man who offered it to him. He built a 1,000-album resume as a collaborator, not a soloist protecting his own spotlight. He put his own name and money behind youth golf and basketball charities for over 30 years running. He joined a supergroup purely to play music he loves alongside musicians he respects, with no commercial upside beyond the joy of it. And at 68, with 22 Grammys, 19 CMA Awards, a spot in the Country Music Hall of Fame, and a Lifetime Achievement Award named after Willie Nelson sitting on his shelf, he is still showing up at the Opry most weekends to play. There's no secret list of grudges here. No hidden feuds waiting to be exposed. What there actually is, according to 4 decades of public record, is a guy from Norman, Oklahoma who got handed a banjo by his dad, spent his 20s learning his craft the hard way in bluegrass bands and as a hired gun session player, turned down a life-changing offer from Dire Straits because he wasn't done chasing his own dream yet, and then spent the next 4 decades of stardom pointing the spotlight at everyone standing next to him almost as often as he pointed it at himself. That's not a hidden grudge book. That's just a career built on showing up for people over and over for 40 years straight. And if you're looking for the real reason Nashville speaks about Vince Gill the way it does, that's it. Not a secret. Just a very long, very consistent track record, out in the open the entire time. Thanks for watching. If this gave you a different picture of Vince Gill than the one you came in with, let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more real stories from country music history.